is the time.
Forever? Tangent. Old.
Halt.
Hashtag always MGM.
You are approaching the unloading area.
Calm down. AK haters.
But what if it could? Behold, the majesty of the Sistine Ceiling.
For the kids.
A salute to all theme parks, but mostly Walt Disney World.
Ha! What a cute ending.
Aloha and
Don't Dillo it.
This is Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz. She is Jen.
Hello.
And I am Frank, and we are here in the year 2025. Can you believe it?
Nope.
That's because we are not. We are actually still in the year 2024 with our final recording of the calendar year. But this episode is dropping on January the 9th, 2025. So happy New Year if we haven't said that already.
Happy New Year. Also, if this is dropping on January the 9th, then there's a program change for us.
Oh.
And that would be that the 7-year-old will now be known as the 8-year-old on the podcast. And today is her birthday, if it's January 9th.
Happy birthday to the newly crowned, the princess that she is, 8-year-old, joining the other 8-year-old for 1 month and 5 days until the 8-year-old is a 9-year-old. Ooh.
Right. So then there'll be 10-year-old, 8-year-old A, 8-year-old B for about a month.
Time is moving so fast.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming in hot in 2025. I don't know if you know, Jen. Are you aware how hot we're coming in?
Oh, I know. I'm ready. It's a big year.
Our guest for this episode of Theme Park Thursday with Dillo's Diz is a returning guest.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, they got all the fires cooking. They got everything. They got everything working. All the plates are spinning. All the metaphors you use are working.
Yes.
And we're very excited to have the guest here today. He is the founder of the Designers Creative Studio. He is the new host of the League of Extraordinary Storytellers. And he has an upcoming book, Creating Memorable Worlds, a journey into themed experience. Please welcome back to the podcast, veteran of Walt Disney Imagineering. It's Theron Skees. Theron, hello.
What a build-up. Holy cow. I mean, that's the announcement of announcements. Thank you so much, guys. Really a pleasure to be back with you.
I feel like we talked to you, how long ago was it? Maybe a month, a half? Something?
Maybe a month. Yeah.
And within days, you're announcing a book. I'm like, what's happening? Wait a second. There's more things happening. We have to get him back. There's so much more to talk about.
True. Well, it's a pleasure to be back with you. Talking about stuff that we're passionate about is always incredible.
Yes, for sure.
No, it's so great. We're here on our Patreon, I should say, at DillosDizResort.com. So we got some folks in the chat. Hopefully they'll get a chance to do a little Q&A here as we get towards the end of the podcast. So we're excited for that as well. But just to get the ball rolling, we know that you were here with James Warda a couple of months ago for How Does Disney Do That? The book that's out there. I mean, it's such a great resource. I can't recommend it enough. Make sure you check it out. But if people didn't check that out, that episode, I'm going to say that 3 times fast. Let's do a little healthy recap about who Theron is and your journey so far.
Fantastic. Well, again, thanks for having me on. I think the last time we were together, as you mentioned, I was here with author James Warda, and he and I connected about 3 years ago, and just made a connection. He had was really a Disney theme park fan and had this amazing kind of experience on Flight of Passage. And the more that we began discussing it, the more I think he realized, I really need to write a book about this. This is amazing. Other people have this similar experience. So that's what kind of set us down that path. And that was about 3 years to get to his finished manuscript and getting his book out, and it's really been rewarding to watch the success of that book and people's reaction to it, and that feels fantastic. I'm so happy and proud to be able to support James on that journey. For myself, I'm a 33, I think 34-year veteran of themed experience design industry. 23 of those years I spent with Walt Disney Imagineering. I've worked with Universal Creative. I got my start in film, and I've worked literally all over the world from there. My career with Disney took a left-hand turn in around the COVID time in 2020. And that's when I decided, I just really don't want to be an employee anymore, and kind of hung my own shingle and shimmied out on the ledge and tried my own thing. And honestly, it's been the best professional decision of my whole career. And even though I didn't make it, right, it was COVID, you were laid off, but it really ended up being fantastic. So I've just had a blast on my own.
I mean, sometimes things happen for a reason.
Mhm.
Even if we're not really looking for them to happen, they
Even
happen to
screaming.
us, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
You didn't work on too big of projects that anyone would be familiar with, but if you were to toss out a couple of those, what would they be?
Sure. Well, my first Disney project was in 1991 in the Disneyland Paris park, which was originally called Euro Disneyland, as I'm sure all your audience knows, because you guys are super sophisticated Uber fans. I worked on Pirates of the Caribbean there, and at the time I was in a thing called artificial rock work. So I was one of those, large sculpture kind of persons that did really large medium, concrete medium, sculpture,
Mm.
and then transitioned into a bunch of other stuff. But so that was one project. I went back to Paris in 2006 and was the creative director for Tower of Terror, that little neighborhood in it's quite visible now when you walk in through the gate, and one of my favorite attractions. So that was really fun. People might be familiar with Disney Springs in Orlando.
Sounds
I
That was
just
familiar.
say on the last episode that we had you on last time, I don't know, everybody probably, but I know personally, I was like so sucked into how you outlined your experience with Disney Springs. I was like, this is everything I ever want to hear.
Yeah.
It's so awesome.
I'm so glad it was that rewarding. That's awesome. Well, I won't say much else about that, other than it was probably my most challenging project. And then I think some people might know I finished my career at Disney leading the Imagineering team for the cruise lines, for Disney Cruise Line. And so was there to design what is called the Triton class of ships, the Treasure and the Wish, and the third, as of yet unnamed, or I should say unannounced name. So that was really, really a wonderful time. So just a few things, a lot of other stuff, but those are the big spots.
Well, and I'm a little bit sad because in 2022 and in August 2024, our entire family, our parents, our spouses, our kids, we all went on the Disney Fantasy. And same boat, same cruise, both
Yeah.
No
times.
change. Yeah.
And then only recently have I learned we could have been seeing your name on Castaway Key. How does that happen? Walk me through that. How do you find out about something? Tell me everything about that.
Well, those moments are, I mean, first, it's an incredibly true honor to be kind of noted like that in a way. And because, I mean, you have to realize that at Imagineering, it's always, there's no I in team, right? It's a collaborative team effort. Teams are extremely dynamic, very fast paced, and it requires this level of working that is very integrated. So you classically, traditionally, nobody's standing out ahead of anybody else. There's people that are accountable, and it may have been your idea, but at the end of the day, it takes everybody to pull it off. So like the windows on Main Street, or these moments at Castaway Cay where some of the senior executives are featured on signs. I mean, it's a true honor. It really is. To be honest with you, I was super surprised it was still there. Because when I left, obviously somebody, filled the role that I was doing.
Yeah.
So I had just assumed that it was taken down, and now that they know, it probably will be. Yeah, so somebody wrote and said, "Oh yeah, it's still up. Here's a picture." I was, wow. So it's neat stuff, really neat stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have to go back immediately
Well, I
because,
guess
yeah.
it's been decided now. We have to get there in a hurry.
Yeah.
On the double. I just want to say, I know we're going to talk a lot about the book and about the podcast, both, but the titles of both just instinctually get me excited because they're things that I crave so much. I have a theater background.
Man, that's great.
The idea of the world of the play is very important to me. So before we get into creating memorable worlds, when you have something like the Tower of Terror in Paris, and there's previous attractions, but you also have this kind of whole palette of things that you can maybe add your own little nuances to. Like, how do you approach something like that? It's similar, it's different. What goes into that process?
Do you mean creatively in general, Frank, or specifically with Tower of Terror?
I like being vague. I think well, let's do both. Let's go specifically Tower of Terror both first.
Okay. Well, how about if I do this? This might be a little bit. I'll make a big statement, then I'll lead in with an example from Tower. How about that? So
Okay.
I think one of the things that's really, really important is in this industry is to remember that it's global, right? It's and everybody is a storyteller. Every role on the project, it doesn't matter if you're design, if you're delivery, if you're in contracts or finance or risk mitigation, or I could go through the list, or creative. You're a storyteller. You're a part of telling that story. So when you're working in a destination that is different than your home, an international destination. So if you grew up in Hong Kong and you're an Imagineer and you're somehow assigned to California, you will be telling stories that need to be relevant to Californians. When I went to Paris, I needed to tell stories, and my team needed to tell stories that were relevant to Europeans.
Yeah.
So that's the big context of the importance of global storytelling and how it has to be relevant to the culture, or, why are we doing this? So with the Tower of Terror, it was distinctly a California story. I mean, distinctly the architecture, the history, and all of the other hotels and things that inspired the look and the feel. And when you walk into Walt Disney Studios Paris, there is that sort of Hollywood kind of feel. So it fit. Yeah. But one of the things that I really wanted to do was to take it in a direction that would be slightly different than California, so that if you were a fan and you visited both, it would feel distinctly different, and that it would have a European, if you will, sort of style. And I'll just clarify that really quickly. One of the coolest things about working on that project was there were quite a few vendors that supported us, ironworks, fabric, and I don't know, you wouldn't call it seamstress, but like curtains and drapes, all of that they were all handmade. So many vendors were in Europe, a lot of them in France, and this is gonna blow you away. What they did was they refurbished castles. That's what they did. So the steel workers, I would go and go in with the steel worker, and they had literally a blacksmith, ding, ding, and they had, these people were stitching curtains by hand. I mean, that was super cool, because you just don't get that in the US.
Right.
Yeah. Wow.
I know. Amazing. I mean, let's face it. We went props shopping in probably one of the largest, I guess you would say, flea market, the largest antiques market almost in the world. It's in a place called Clignancourt. It's on the north side of Paris, and not the safest neighborhood. So you should go during the day. But holy cow, it was a paradise for finding props. Everything you can imagine.
That's so cool. That's very cool.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, and Tower of Terror, no matter where you are, the detail,
Right.
obviously of the original in Florida is just you still walk in there and we're awed. Every time.
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, I do feel like that attraction overall is like, Disney is detailed always, but that one in particular for me is like this turning point almost in how detailed Disney was about to get moving forward. And yeah, it's always so cool to see.
I have to just throw out something, just a small detail based on what you said, Jen, that your audience might find interesting, is that, we're as creative, we start the vision, we start the storytelling for the whole project. We we develop that story to as a part of the solution for the client, right? So when you look at something like Tower, the two ways that you have to tell a story is either a real story or a fantasy story. It's only kind of two types, because sci-fi and everything could, there's a real element, but there's also a fantasy element. So the cool thing about Tower is that it's a storyline that's based on the Twilight Zone, and that is 100% real and 100% fantasy blended together. So the hotel itself, real. Everybody was there. It all happened. It's, but there was this supernatural kind of, paranormal thing that took place. And that was what gives you an infusion of fantasy. Those are really great stories to tell, actually.
Yeah, that's cool.
No, that's awesome. And to that, when we spoke with you last time, we talked about Star Wars being an inspiration when you were younger. What other worlds were you drawn to when you were younger, that maybe not at the level of Star Wars, but something that you look to and go, wow, this is something that sparked me. Maybe I had no idea until 20 years later, but what kind of, whether it's books or movies or TV, anything?
Great question. I was a big sci-fi fan, so films like Blade Runner just defined the genre for me, and a whole host of others that I won't bore you with, but that was amazing. I read Frank Herbert's Dune. I don't think I got through all of the books, but I got through the first 3, and that I'm so grateful to Denis to come out with the film's just absolutely stunning representation. Really love that. I'm a huge fan of like Christopher Nolan, because I really love a story that's told from a perspective that you think as the viewer, but you come to find out there's a big twist, and you didn't realize that the story you were watching was actually being told from another perspective. I really, really like that, because it just causes you to think, like the film Memento, right? Just stunning, right? Just, a lot of people hate it because they want that, 1, 2, 3, and a nice conclusion at the end.
Yeah.
No, and I mean, we talk about Inception all the time of how, you're getting so pulled into a world and you have no idea, like you're still watching a story almost, because you're in that world until it really, that twist comes and it knocks you out.
Yeah. It's really true. And the really cool thing, and again, I'm a huge fan, so I'm going to fanboy for just a minute. Inception's one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the fact that you can watch that movie over and over, and very much like when you visit a Disney theme park, you still pick up things that you didn't see the first time. And it kind of blows my mind, actually, because films traditionally not supposed to be that way, right? It's not meant to really be that way. It's meant to tell the story. But you can watch Tenet, you can watch Inception, you can watch Memento, like 5 times, and I'm still mining details of the story out of that I didn't see before, and I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So one of your new projects is a podcast. I think that was after you talked to us and you were like, what? I should do a podcast. I know that's how it all came about. So it's fine. Called The League of Extraordinary Storytellers. I was able to listen to your first episode with Craig
Oh,
Russell.
awesome.
And as soon as I start listening to it, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to nerd out to this podcast every time it drops, because you're pulling the curtain back a little bit. And we're hearing from, for us who, to use your term, fanboy and fangirl over all of these things in Disney, to hear from the people that worked on the theme park and theme parks overall. I mean, we just enjoy that overall, but to hear those behind the scenes stories and how people got into their jobs and where they started to where they landed, it's all very cool. So it probably wasn't us. So can you tell me how you decided to start this podcast?
Well, thank you so much. I mean, really, I'm very respectful of anybody that's been doing this as well as you guys, and for as long as you guys. So I'm serious. No smoke blowing. It's cred. Total respect. This wasn't me just sitting around going, "Gosh, I'm so bored. What else do I need to do with my life?" That was not it at all. The reality is, I had so many people that were close to me. That's the whole reason I wrote a book too. Is so many people had said, "You need to do this. You need to do this. That you have a vision for this that is unique." And even though there's a zillion podcasts out there about Disney and even about behind the scenes and things, and people have been doing it a heck of a lot longer than me. People really that I know and respect said, "You really need to do this." So when I the podcast and the book are kind of intrinsically linked. And as I was writing the book, I'll bounce back and forth between the two if you don't mind.
No, please.
As I was writing the book, I thought, there's so many people that you in your network when you're an Imagineer. I'm assuming it's the same when you're in a Universal Creative or you work at Merlin or Storyland Studios or Tate or something. You have a network of people you trust, your colleagues. And I didn't want, the whole idea of my book is to lay out the entire map of the industry for readers and then give them the understanding at a deep, detailed level of who works in the industry and then how they work together and then the processes. How does all this take place? I mean, very detailed mapping of all that and a bunch of other stuff. And I thought, how good would it be to have others in my network participate and, in a sense, not only lend their expertise, but to, in itself, to have all these contributing experts would be an embodiment of a team working together. So, in a sense, that's kind of what I wanted. And after I have the main manuscript done, we're in design right now, leading up to production, which is incredibly exciting. I've done all the design work, page layout, illustrations, graphics, and because I'm a nut, and that's the way I just think about it. My publisher's amazing, and they're helping every time. But I thought to myself, well, if I did a podcast here, I've got 13 people, experts that just contributed to my book. Well, that's 13 shows. That's an entire year of podcasting. Right. So that's kind of what I set out to do. I had the idea for the League of Extraordinary Storytellers for quite some time. In fact, 2 years ago, I launched into it. I had a different logo, I had everything, and I interviewed 3 people. And my consulting side of my business got so busy that I never got to do anything with it. I thought about maybe it's a Netflix show and it never really came around. So when I wrote the book and it circled back, I'm like, this is the perfect format. So anyways, short story long, that's how I got there. But my passionate vision for the podcast is this. I really want to bring on people, experts that work in very different fields than me, because I really want listeners to see how 2, or maybe we'll do 3, or maybe we'll do a panel sometimes. Very, very different experts who actually speak different languages, how they work together, what's the common ground, and what are the details behind those expertise. That's kind of my vision for what I want to deliver with the podcast. I hope I can pull it off.
I think you'll be able to do it. Yeah.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, Jen.
Yeah.
Whenever I see the word, I love the word extraordinary, whether it's extraordinary or extraordinary. Like I like when I work in theater and with characters, like to me, it's gotta be both. Right? You gotta be extraordinary, but you gotta be extraordinary. Like I like both those ideas.
Yeah.
And so I love this story, the name of the podcast for that reason, with the extraordinary storytellers. But what I also love what you're talking about here is as you're creating memorable worlds, you got a whole community. You got like you got your 13. Right. You know, you go expand beyond that with all the connections you've been making over the last few years. When you're I mean, what comes first, I guess, chicken or egg? You think about the world, or you think about the story these days? Which one of those things? Which way are you going with that?
Well, that's a really great question, actually, Frank. And the way that I would answer that is, and this may be disappointing for some people, but there's a really important realization that any new professional who's entering this industry really needs to embrace. And I try to get to students and young professionals as early as possible to hit them with this reality so that they're really prepared. This industry is a commercial industry. It is not about hanging art in a gallery. It is not a metro park in the middle of a city. It is a commercial venture whose main objective is to create an experience with a brand and emotionally connect an audience to that brand through those experiences. And that costs money. You have a money to get in, you upcharge for drinks and retail and food and all that stuff. So it's a commercial venture. And what that means is, and this is hard for my creative brothers and sisters, but what that means is every idea that you have does not belong to you. It is the client's. And there's a beauty and a horror in that at the same time, because in the creative team, it's risky. You dream up these things that didn't exist before, and springing off this white paper comes to life all these amazing, as you said, Frank, worlds, characters, timeframes, things to do, invitations for the guests to join. And if that doesn't resonate as a solution for the client, then it can get modified, changed, or tossed. And that's the client's protocol, right? They're paying you to deliver this. So I give all of that as context for the answer that I'm going to give. And the answer is that story starts first. And the reason is the practice that I use, I labeled narrative experience design. There's a big definition of that on my website if anybody's interested. But narrative experience design is about creating solutions for a client. And what that is, briefly, is you only need 3 things. You need the client's brand. You really need to understand that. You need to understand the client's audience and the client's business objectives. Once you kind of understand those things, the story that you create encapsulates those 3 core principles. Therefore, the story itself becomes not just the North Star, but it is the mechanism that delivers brand growth, revenue strategy, expanding an audience, whatever the business objectives are, taking over a market, and separating the story from those 3 elements with the client means that the story is completely disposable. And there's so many times in so many projects where in the middle of the project or 3/4 of the way through, something happens. It's difficult. It could be catastrophic. It could be terrible. And you always go back to the story, to that North Star, to enable you to land the plane, get that project landed correctly. So the world itself comes out of the story. The story creates a solution for the client, and ultimately that is developed into what we call world. Sorry, that was a lot of detail.
No, I love all of it.
No, that's that's really interesting. In 2024, in the world of social media and how crazy that has gotten, I do feel like, good or bad, everyone feels like they're telling their stories now, which in a way has been really awesome and given a lot of people a voice. But how do you think, just the growth of social media, or, a platform like TikTok or Instagram, where brands are also able to share their stories in that way, how have you seen it from like a business perspective? How has that changed the storytelling and
Sure.
how you have to tell it in order to bring in that audience?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it goes kind of without saying that as a species, human beings were wired for story. Research has shown that our brains actually catalog memories in a story format. So we, as storytellers, have a distinct advantage because we can build stories understanding the human psyche, the human need for escape, play, community, and storytelling. So designing and crafting those stories, specifically knowing with the design criteria, in fact, that what you create has to make an emotional connection with the audience. And the audience is as varied as it could possibly be. It could be young people, it could be older people, it could be wheelchair bound people, it could be sighted people, it could be people from another cultures, people who speak a different language. I mean, you start layering on the demographic, and it's just thousands of layers. And how can you create an emotional connection for all of them? So contextually, that's the background of the industry playing into humanity's need to tell stories. We started with paintings on a cave wall, and now we've got TikTok. So we're still telling stories, and it's our story. And a lot of times it's our tribe's story, right? Our group of friends, our family, the people that we identify with, that's our tribe. And we sometimes, you see that being told, group centric. If it's a little, and everybody else like, what, and all the cool people are like, yeah, we know. So storytelling. Yeah, I mean, frankly, I love the fact that storytelling has only increased. People telling their stories now. I'm Gen X, right? So it's not my generation to film myself eating cereal in the morning and then walking to my office and I'm turning on my computer. That's just not what I do. But that's not wrong. It's what Gen Z does. So cool on them. That's what they do. And I think respecting other people's storytelling is really what we need to do in our industry. Because if you're telling, and I'll just use the terms, I don't mean it derogatorily. If you're telling boomer stories to Gen Z or Gen Alpha, nobody's going to get it, right? But if you tell a hybrid story where the boomers are talking to the Gen Xers, and the Gen Xers and the boomers have a nostalgic moment, and then Gen Xers want to bring their millennial kids and their Gen Alpha Gen Z, all getting confused, grandchildren. Now you got this multi-generational, pot cooking, which is just, I just love that. It's beautiful to see. And that's what keeps us in business, frankly.
Well, and that's what we talked a lot about with how does Disney do that, is that idea of transcendence. So, of course, as a fellow Gen X here, I look at something like Wicked the past month or so, and I've seen a Broadway show 3 times. I was stunned by how I was sucked into that world, and immediately was like, I need theme park attractions. I need immersive experiences. I want to be around this more. and have the feelings that I felt in that movie, which
Yeah.
totally took me by surprise because I've seen the Broadway show 3 times.
Right.
So
Exactly.
when you look at something like that, especially the last 10 years where, we started with like, there was immersive world, immersive theater, immersive worlds. That immersive was a big word, but then it was kind of countered with the IP idea for a while. Now you got a world and you got an immersive experience potentially with an IP.
Yeah.
When you look at Wicked, what do you see?
Well, I see what I find interesting, and it really tracks well with what you were saying, Frank, is that IP is no longer satisfied. I should say brands are no longer satisfied with the IP that we grew up with on Saturday morning, sitting with a bowl of sugar pops in front of, Tom and Jerry or whatever, or Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner. That is no longer, that's not a world. That's not a brand home. So now brand is so inclusive, and I don't mean that in the politically correct way. I mean, it includes everything. It's got streaming, it's got retail, it's got publishing, it has film, it has a theme park, so you can now have so many different touch points that are included in the brand, that you have literally a multiplicity of experiences that you can have with the brand. And so I believe it or not, that's what the majority of the work that I do now with clients through my firm, the Designers Creative Studio, is that I work with them from a brand perspective. And basically that's what I do. I ask the simple question: would you like your customers to be transformed into audience members? And they said, that's interesting. What does that mean? And I said, well, whatever if you build a product or if you have a service, doesn't matter if you have a store or it's all, software as a service kind of thing. Would you want your customers, whatever they are, would you want your customers to connect more deeply with your brand? And that would drive loyalty and repeat, visitation, repeat business. And there's not a CFO on the planet, frankly, that's going to say, I'm gonna check out on that. We're fine with the 50,000 customers we have. Nobody's going to say that. So everybody is interested in telling a brand story across the wide field of their brand touch points. That could be digital, it could be a call center, it could be the frontline employee, it could be the product itself, the store. And when you start thinking of it in those terms, it's like, wow, if you take what Walt did for the theme parks and dissect that into every other segment of the global economy, there's a lot you can bring that can connect people in the same way that all of us are connected with theme parks, and you can do that with other brands.
It's so fascinating because again, I am such a character first person that I see where you're coming from, but at the same time, I'm like, but what if it was just characters who could drive this and the world that forms around them? And
right.
And you explain it this way. I'm like, no, that's how that.
Doesn't work. But the interesting thing is, if you had if we all need to wear shoes, right? I mean, let's just pick a utilitarian thing. Some people aren't fashion minded. It's just they're not focused. So they're going to think of their shoes in a utilitarian function. And there's a whole lot of brands that cater to that, but there's more brands that cater to the fashion. Well, if Jen, you own a shoe store, I own a shoe store, and Frank, you own a shoe brand, right? We're going to be in competition forever because we can only build them cheaper, sell them more expensive, right? Discount them deeper, or make some kind of design change, some differentiation that really moves the needle. That's what the world is, that's what the world is all about. You could apply that to cars and phones and appliances and homes, and there's no end to the stuff that we as humans need and consume. And if you took the idea of narrative experience design and applied that to some of these brands, you go back to the core why that they exist, and you can tell some pretty amazing stories about the brand that then causes them to stand out in your mind as a consumer differently than others. And I think that's really cool because it's taking something very pedestrian, very functional, possibly, and making it into something that's like, wow. I mean, a phone is a kind of a pedestrian functional thing until Jobs came around and said, no. We need to carry Cray supercomputers around with us. That's what we need. And now people sleep outside of Apple stores for the phone. I mean, who does that? That's not a customer. That's a fan. That's an audience member. And so, anyways, I could go on a huge roll in a tangent there, but I love the fact, I really do. This to me, in my mind, goes all the way back to Walt, right? Because Walt launched the idea of theme park. He launched the idea of telling stories and creating a world in which those things took place. And he used the arts of filmmaking to pull it off. And here we are all these decades and years later. And a lot of us that have been in the industry and are now out in the rest of the world are coming to these very similar conclusions that you can have this influence in other markets, and it really is good. It's fun.
To your point of just in the example of all of us having a shoe store, and especially as the years go on, when companies are maybe pulling back on the story they were once telling, and because they wanted to be different and they wanted to stand out, and they're not going to be like everybody else, and prices are going up, and they have a business to run, so there's certain things that have to happen. How do you tell the story differently, or how do you think they can continue to make those connections when they've been in business for 10 years and something has to change because the money isn't coming in the same way, or whatever the reasoning is?
Right. I think it all comes back to what I learned at Imagineering, and that was really a very guest-centric, or you could say customer-centric, I guess, focus. Everything. Every meeting was, what would the guests think? How do we, put this together for them? It's guest centric. Operations at Disney, guest centric. Everybody's focused on that. And I'm talking about the golden years, right? There's a lot of conflicting opinions on Disney today. So I'm not going to get into that. I just talk about the traditional classic Disney that we all know and love. And the real brilliance about that is that Disney knew its guests really, really well. And that trained me and other of my colleagues to really focus on the guest. So if I was to take Jen's example and was working with a client, what my first thing would be is, well, number one of the largest categories of customers currently in the US is millennials, right? Followed very quickly behind by Gen Z. And one tremendously important aspect of millennials is they don't trust big corporations. They want authenticity, and they would much rather pay for an experience than a product, right? There's probably a zillion others that marketeers who are way smarter than me would know that. But those three things alone could give me the superpower to help a client level up and change the way that they emotionally connect with their audience, right? Because if you come off as the big bad shoe company, that has, these kids in Myanmar building your shoes so that you can make, that's not going to sell. Nobody wants that. So it's that balance. I know we're way outside of the theme park realm with this discussion, but I hope your audience gets the idea that as cool as the Disney is, and as amazing as those worlds are, the principles contained within working there can be applied to really almost every center market center in the world, in the economy. And I think that's so beautiful and tremendously exciting for those of us who are out there in the world working.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the WWE and have been since I was a kid. Extraordinary characters doing extraordinary
Yeah.
feats of strength
Larger than life.
and athletics.
Yeah.
But more recently, they have started creating more environments almost and worlds and atmospheres. And just this past weekend, they did their old TV show Saturday Night's Main Event, where they replicated what the entrance was like, and it gave just like a different feeling. I'm like, you're creating new worlds
Yeah.
within your product that still has that shared experience that people crave, and stories that are universal and transcendent. So
It's
you
beautiful.
just see
Love
it in different places. Yeah. And to the parks, I guess my question, we love pockets. We call them pockets in the theme park, where it's like, it's not the big thing, but we turned a corner and we sat on a bench and we're like, why am I surrounded by amazingness right now?
Exactly.
Why does this feel so magical?
Is there a pocket, a little nook, a little cranny within? It doesn't have to be a Disney park. It can be anywhere that you feel has an extraordinary story behind it. And when you go there, you're like, this place is so cool right here in this spot, this location.
Well, I can just tell you a place. I'll talk about Disney Springs just because it's not a park and might be a good example. We really worked hard to create just those things, these little undiscovered areas that were hopefully filled with wonder. Right? It's like, I didn't. Now it all makes sense. And so there's it is in Town Center, right across from the Welcome Center. So in the middle, the what is it called? The operations, right? Guest relations, sorry, in the center. If you're standing right in front of it, to the right, there's this like alley that goes back. It's kind of hidden, and there's an elevator with these brass doors, and it takes you upstairs to the what is it? Disney timeshare, right? Disney Vacation Club.
Yeah.
And it's this really like little hidden place, and there's benches and there's little plants and stuff in there. And we just thought that those moments would really be important. Same with On the Springs itself. We did a dock system that kind of protrudes out into the water. It's not huge because we didn't want 1,000 people standing there, maybe 5, that comfortably, maybe 10. I know in the summer night, at 9, it's probably 1,000, but that wasn't what it was designed for. But so when I was there, I mean, that was what we strived for. How do we find these little niches? How do we create this? It shouldn't feel like this well-worn path where, all the people, all the cattle, just went through. It's just, you should feel the joy of discovery. And that's what makes, I think, for a guest really excited, is you found something that you feel that not a lot of people know about. And that's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have an important question. I believe that there is a Disney breeze.
Disney breeze?
And now that you are a returning guest, I'm not ashamed to ask this question. I feel there's a Disney breeze. And I want to know if you feel like there's a Disney breeze. There's a special. You're just standing in the parks. There's a little bit of a breeze, but it's not like a normal wind, and it's just sort of like, maybe it's near a fountain, maybe it's there's just this breeze, and I am a firm believer in it. And I would love you to just confirm that's a real thing for everybody who's heard me talk about it over the years.
Well, I think what I can confirm is that the Disney breeze is a phenomenon that's not related to any mechanical design. So therefore, I must surmise that the Disney breeze is the collective gasp of wonder from the millions of guests who are there. That would be my summation.
I like it. I'm going to go. Yes, that's exactly it.
So
you can use it. It's okay. You heard it here first.
That's right. Okay, perfect. Yes.
A little extra magic there. Speaking of memorable worlds, we do have a question here in the chat from our friend Jeffers. Of all the upcoming Disney Parks projects we know about, Villains Land, Cars Land, Monsters Inc., etc. Monsters Inc. Which one excites you the most?
Oh gosh. now I have to.
You gotta pick.
Well, it's how do I answer this? I don't want to crush Jeffers. I'm a puritanical storyteller, and what that means is I long for the days of original IP creation. So that as a disclaimer, I don't. I would really have liked to have seen the company lean into one or two places that were not extensions of existing brand IP. That's just me. That's what I would like to see. I can't say that I have a favorite. I like the Pixar stuff. I think is really cool. I would, now I'm going to lean into what I wish. I wish they did something with the Incredibles more, because I love that world. I love the fact that it's a whole family that has to come together and solve the,
Right.
problem, come against the villain. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to give you a great answer there, but that's my answer. I had a similar question one time. I think it was in a presentation room, and I was like, 200-300 people in there, and one of the questions came up about what I thought about hidden Mickeys or something related to hidden Mickeys, and I'm sure my publicist who was with me from Disney was like this, because they knew how I felt. And I paused for like 3 seconds. I'm like, should I do it? Should I not do it? And what I did was I said, I'm so sorry, but I really don't like hidden Mickeys. And there was a, collective hand wringing and knuckle biting, as to heresy. And I just went to explain myself that I don't believe that as Imagineers we should be putting anything in the scene unless it's related to the scene. If we want to do anything hidden and undisclosed or a difficult to find Easter egg, grabbing a gaming terminology, then it should be from that world, from that scene, and should drive the story to make a deeper connection for the guest emotionally. Whereas he's sitting in 1930s, 1940s Adventureland it's a record scratch. It doesn't, not that there's one there, but it's a record scratch. It doesn't need to be there. So anyways, that's my opinion. It's not a popular one, but that's how I feel about it.
I mean, I think we are, super nostalgic, and we long for a lot of things from the past. And we grew up, we just mentioned this last week, of, growing up with the hotel, the Polynesian being a theme, the beach club being a theme, the board, they were their own themes, World Showcase, each country, that's the theme. And so sometimes when they make these announcements that they're going to put in characters, even if it's subtle or bigger, like a ride or whatever it is, we're always like, but it's you already had it. You already had it. You had the theme itself. Yeah.
I will say that I understand why they're doing it. It's logical business sense from one mindset, right? The logical business sense from one mindset is it's completely risk averse in their minds.
Yeah.
And we spent all these billions on these IPs. We need to, we need to wring it out. We need to really take advantage of these things. And again, with the right lenses on, that makes sense. If you change the lens slightly and look a little bit broadly, you realize that you're losing some of you're kind of eroding a bit of your brand there with your core audience, who has a passionate and deep desire for a different form of storytelling. And so anyways, if I was king for a day and somebody asked for my advice, that would be the advice that I would give.
In the time we have remaining, which could be hours, I don't know. But I wanted to circle back to creating memorable worlds a little bit, and just what I loved about this conversation is talking about the Nolan movies, and then my mind triggers into God, the worlds he created, and especially like Inception came at a time when really, though it was happening, we weren't saying immersive theater until things like, I think of like Sleep No More, and that
Right.
was around the same time. It hit at the same time that movies like Inception were coming out, and so
Yeah.
things were happening in different genres of media, but they all kind of invoking the same feeling. So
Yeah.
as you have the book and you're working forward, do you see what's coming next? Can you see ahead, or is it just that this transcendence exists, and that's okay too?
I think it's all okay. For me, related to the book, what I wanted to do, the book to me is a cathartic expression of my 33 whatever
Mhm.
years
Mhm.
experience in the industry. And when I looked around, I should go back. When COVID happened, we're all sitting at home. Some of us didn't know, or actually most of us didn't know if we were going to have a job when it
Mhm.
was all over, and we didn't know when it was going to be all over. So it gave us a lot of time to think. And being transparent, I asked the very hard question: is anything that I've done in my professional career, would it help anybody? How would I talk about what I know? How would I
Mhm.
talk about what I did? Is it important? Could other industries use it? You just start asking these questions, because at Imagineering, you go from one 4-year project to a 3-year project to a 5-year project, and
Mhm.
you get maybe a weekend in between. It's nonstop. You're in the fast lane, and it's 50 hours a week, sometimes 70 hours a week. So this full stop, sit on the couch and think about things, was really where the book came from. And
Yeah.
the answers that came to me after a lot of research is there weren't very many books on the market that did, in my estimation, humble estimation, a very good job explaining the totality the totality of the
Mhm.
industry.
Mhm.
There's a lot of memoirs that talk a lot about the personal experiences of people, which is incredibly interesting.
Yes.
And there are very subject specific books that have come out that do a really good job going deep into a particular area. But I just didn't find a lot of them that did that. So that was kind of encouraging to me to go out and say, let's build a map of the industry. I want to talk about the people, how they work together, how these processes come together. When I was a kid, the whole Star Wars story, someone in my family gifted me an Industrial Light and Magic book. It's the big black Industrial Light and Magic book.
Yes.
And that thing was like, a roadmap for me. I read every word. I want to do this. I want to be like Richard Edlund. I want to be like Joe Johnson. I want to do this. I want to build these worlds. And if in some measure my book can be even just a fraction of that to a high schooler, to a freshman in college, that says, oh, now I have a roadmap. Now I
Mhm.
see. And
Mhm.
the last chapter of my book is called The Story of You. And the idea is it's taking everything that we've covered in the book and giving you, the reader, the idea, the ability to identify in yourself your passions, the way that you were wired, where would you be the best suited in the industry, and allows you to chart your course in the industry. So anyways, that's the long and the short of the book, and the why and the wherewithal that I my hope that it delivers to readers.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for it.
Wonderful.
However
Wonderful.
we can figure out how to feel the feels, we're all about it. But
Yeah.
the
Oh,
one
that's
thing we
awesome.
did learn, as Jeffers mentions, is that Disney does not manufacture the Disney breeze.
No.
It's
I'm
really,
so sorry. I know it would be different. Hey, I should say though, maybe this is a little hook. Disney does use, they do create signature scents for different areas.
Mhm.
So for
Mhm.
example, when I was with the cruise line, they created a signature scent. Took quite a while, a lot of work, but when you walk in, scent is a very large part of our memory building system as human beings.
Yes, for sure.
Visual and auditory, and of course, other senses contribute as well. But scent is really quite big. So,
Yeah.
defining a signature scent for a hotel, for the ships and everything, really, really important for memory building.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that hits us immediately.
Immediately.
The Polynesian in here. It smells like the beach club in here.
So true. And those are happy memories. My memory is this is sad, I guess, but every time I smell like diesel gas, like from a truck,
Mhm.
I think about the trams, the parking lot trams.
Oh, yeah.
As a
Mhm.
kid,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
family wasn't very well to do, so we got the choice. You could have presents for Christmas, or you could go to Disney World for
Yeah.
the whole day, sun up to
Yeah.
sundown, right? The whole day, which was exhausting for my parents, I'm sure. But that's the memory that's stuck in my mind, is the excitement going from the parking lot to the front gate, and you smell the diesel from the parking tram.
I completely understand that as someone who I know it's not healthy, but the Tomorrowland Speedway, it's
Oh, right.
still you get those smells,
We
and
loved
I
it.
love
Yep.
the smell over
So
there.
true.
Yeah,
You would hate Hong Kong then, because they're all battery powered.
right. It's all healthy over there.
Exactly.
Jeffers is sneaking in one last question, so
Oh,
maybe
cool.
we can wrap it
Thanks.
up this way. And I will add, because this is the second time we've talked to you, and the first time I got so enthralled in that Disney Springs story that I never asked a similar question about the cruise line. So maybe it can go that way. But
Sure.
as everyone in Imagineering are storytellers, whether directly or indirectly, what do you think it takes to be a great storyteller? Any special traits?
Such a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. We talked a little bit about, I guess you could categorize it as sociology, right? No designer is running out necessarily to grab a sociology degree, but you should really know your audience. That's number one. You really need to know your audience and know the breadth of your audience. And that's one thing working at Disney really showed me, frankly, is what's the audience? Well, it's I always say it's 4 to 94 years old, right? It's just huge demographic. And so I would say know your audience. Tell stories that are relevant to the culture that your audience lives in. And then I would say that you need to tell stories that are resonant emotionally. If you think about all the Disney stories, right? Walt is most famous for taking the Grimm's fairy tales, and they were called Grimm's fairy tales for a reason. They were grim, right? Walt took those, rewrote them, and gave them what he termed the happily ever after. And that is the signature Walt Disney story,
Mhm.
is that Bambi's mother dies, but is tomorrow going to be a better day? So what Disney taught us is it's okay to, while you're in an experience, whether it's a film or an attraction or a show, it's okay to go through the range of emotions. In fact, that endears us to that experience even more. So storytellers, it's okay to take people through a range of emotions that are applicable to the story that you're telling. Finally, Jeffers, what I would say is everybody's hidden superpower is their ability to actively listen. So often, and if you've been alive for any amount of time on this earth, you've experienced having a conversation with somebody, and you become acutely aware of the fact that they seem to be not listening to you necessarily, but just thinking about what they're going to say as soon as you stop talking. And, my friend, that is not listening. So one thing that my career has taught me is that to be a true storyteller, you have to listen to your colleagues, your peers, the client, the audience, because they will tell you all that you need to know about the type of story that you need to tell.
Yeah.
Uh,
He's guilty
Jeffers
of
is
that.
feeling
I hope that was a good enough answer, Jeffers.
what you don't know, Theron, is that you have solved 2 mysteries on this podcast today.
Oh, wow.
For many years, for almost 8 years, we have debated whether it's Caribbean or Caribbean, or is it applicable or applicable? You have said both of these words in this hour, and mystery solved.
Well, please don't use me as the definition of the English language, right? Because, the people that invented the language still use the word aluminium, which all of us, if you look at all the word, all those letters aren't in there. So I have a lot of English friends. So if they heard this, they would be laughing.
All right. Oh, so close. I thought we did it. I thought that.
Tomato or tomato, they both taste the same.
Yeah.
Once again, Theron, this has just been a tremendous conversation that we can't thank you enough for. We know we can pre-order Creating Memorable Worlds, a journey into themed experience, but I'll give you the platform here to talk about all the places and all the things and everything you got, all the fires you got warming up.
Oh, very cool. Well, thank you for that. The book is as you mentioned is in pre-order. You can just go to the website creatingmemorableworlds.com, and it kind of talks a little bit more about what's in the book, what's tells you what to expect, and it gives you what my publisher and I have labeled as the signature bundle, right? So why would I pre-order? Why not just wait for Amazon? I know I can get it cheaper, shipping is free. Why would I pre-order? Well, I'll tell you why, because you get some really, really cool stuff. The first 250 pre-orders get a numbered signed book, right? And I'm not going to give away, I'm doing something really, really special in those books that will be a part of the numbering and the signature. So it'll be really, really special. You get a custom designed bookmark. You can use that anywhere. It'll be a Creating Memorable Worlds bookmark. I'm also producing something called the quick reference guide for themed experience design. So that's going to be, 8.5x11, two-sided sheet that'll have some really good, I think, very helpful quick references that will that people can take into the parks with them, that students can use, that everybody can use. I'm also launching something brand new. It's a new technology that I've joined forces with, and it's called Tempt Me. And it is basically my own personal AI curator, knowledge curator. And I'll be building memberships. And if you're one of the 250, you get this free for a period of time. But imagine all of the benefits of like a Chat GPT, where you're asking GPT questions about whatever, and it's searching the great big world. Or if you're feeding it information, it's searching the stuff that you feed it. Well, my knowledge curator will search everything that I know, every video, every interview, every page from my book, every blog I've ever written, decades of information, all in this knowledge vault. And this very simple interface will be, you can ask this AI anything, and it'll give you really, really good answers as if I'm writing it to you. So I'm excited to test that out. I think students are really going to get a kick out of that. And then finally, but wait, there's more category. Finally, I'm going to do a webinar. Probably end up having to do a couple webinars, because if it's 250 people, that would be kind of impersonal on one webinar. So I'll probably split it up, and that just gives those pre-orders individuals the opportunity to really dialogue with me for free. So anyways, that's kind of what the bundle is about. After the 250 is met, we'll go away from all of the goodies, and it'll just be pre-order.
That's so cool. That's awesome. And one final question: do you sleep? Because that's a lot of projects.
Yeah, I have a good work-life balance. I really do. I mean, coming from being a senior executive, where I literally was clocking 50 to 70 hours a week and traveling at least 1 week a month. It was usually more than that. I can't tell you how happy I am to have the freedom that I do email by the pool if I want. I can sleep until like 7:30, 8 o'clock, which is amazing. I was usually up at 5:30 every morning. For 30 years, I was always out of the house before everybody in my family woke up. And many times I got home, and I'm sure there's many listeners who are in the same situation. I got home and kids were already in bed. So the freedom that I have now, I absolutely adore. And what's super fun is in my advisory and consulting business, I really get to work with some very amazing clientele, and I'm kind of choosy, but I'm so glad that I am, because I've met some of the neatest, coolest, most wonderful people, and we get to work on some really fabulous things. So I feel quite blessed in that arena.
That's awesome.
No, that's fantastic. Theron Skees, thank you so much again for joining us. And Jeffers with the great questions here at the end.
Thank you.
as well. Secretly, I hope that when Jen and I are back in Orlando, we can arrange something. Maybe
Yeah.
a little meetup quick
Do
talk
reach out.
somewhere. I don't know.
Yes.
We like ale houses, because we're nostalgic for our time when we lived in Orlando. So I don't know.
Pirate songs and ale houses. Okay.
There you go.
So
Excellent. No,
But,
please do reach out. You never know. I would love it if I had time available. That would be great.
that would be fantastic. Thanks once again. Until we all meet again, gather again. That's Theron Skees. She's Jen. I'm Frank. Bye-bye.
Deuces. The Dillo's Diz podcast is hosted by Frank Cardillo and Jen Cardillo Snyder. Music produced by Matt Harvey. Logos and video production courtesy of Snidillo Studios. Dillo's Diz Resort is our Patreon with tiers starting as low as $1 per month. You can visit dillosdizresort.com to learn more. Follow us on TikTok, Instagram, X Twitter, and Facebook at Dillo's Diz. Check us out on YouTube by visiting youtube.com/DillosDiz. Don't forget to like and subscribe while you're there. We also have merch available on TeePublic and Etsy. For all this and more, visit our one-stop shop, dillosdiz.com. Dillo's Diz Podcast 2025.